to speak one-on-one with voters and hear their concerns firsthand. But we know his campaign travel is certainly ramping up. He hit several battleground states over the last few days across the Midwest. He's heading out west to Arizona and Nevada this week. But one political vulnerability that no matter where the president goes, he is not able to avoid, Alex, is his handling of the Israel-Hamas war, with many activists saying that they are not happy with his handling of the Israel-Hamas war and his continued relations with Prime Minister Netanyahu. But those divisions that we have seen between the president and Prime Minister Netanyahu have spilled more into the public eye over the last few months, especially as we've seen the humanitarian crisis in Gaza worsen. Remember, we heard a few days ago that Netanyahu approved the IDF's plans for a ground invasion of Rafah, where over 1 million Palestinians have been sheltering over the last few months. NSC spokesperson Admiral John Kirby was asked about that on the Sunday shows this morning. Listen to his response here.
We would not support such an operation unless or until they've got a credible, executable plan to take care of the 1.5 million refugees that have been pushed into Rafah because of operations in Khan Yunis to the north and Gaza City even further to the north. Now, the Israeli Defense Forces say that they have such a plan for an evacuation. They talked about humanitarian islands in Gaza. Again, we'd welcome the opportunity to see that, to see if that's actually executable and doable.
And notably, Alex, Kirby refused to say whether the United States would condition further military aid to Israel if Netanyahu went through with these plans for a ground invasion of Gaza without solidifying this plan to protect civilians there, Alex.
Right, you are. Okay, thank you so much for that, Ali Rafa. Well, joining me right now, NBC's Jillian Frankel from Columbus, Ohio. So on the flip side here, Jillian, Donald Trump made some very inflammatory remarks in Ohio yesterday. Tell us what he said.
Alex, former President Donald Trump was here in Ohio yesterday rallying on behalf of Senate candidate Bernie Moreno, who's set to face off on Tuesday in the primary here in Ohio. While he was here, though, he made some notable comments saying that there would be a, quote, bloodbath if he's not reelected. But just to add a bit of context here, this came up as he was talking about the possibility of a trade war with China over the automobile industry and auto manufacturing plants. He also talked a lot about immigration, criticizing President Joe Biden's, as he calls it, open border policies. I want you to hear more from Trump's rally. Take a listen.
If I had prisons that were teeming with MS-13 and all sorts of people that they've got to take care of for the next 50 years, right? Young people, they're in jail for years, if you call them people. I don't know if you call them people. In some cases, they're not people, in my opinion, but I'm not allowed to say that because the radical left says that's a terrible thing to say. Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country.
And Alex, former President Donald Trump has vowed to launch the largest domestic deportation operation in American history. This has been something that's coming up on the campaign trail as he looks ahead to the possibility of a second term in office. Alex?
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much, Jillian Frankel, for the latest there from Ohio. Let's bring in Don Calloway, Democratic strategist, host of the Caucus Room podcast, and founder of the National Voter Protection Action Fund, and Susan Del Percio, Republican strategist and MSNBC political analyst. I guess David Jolly has the hour off, so that's okay. I'm glad to have the two of you. And I want to get your comments about what we've just heard from Donald Trump last night. I'm going to start with you, Don, because it is clear he is trying to appeal to a very specific section of his base. But how can he think that any of this is going to help? Because isn't he just appealing to people who are already in his camp?
Well, there's no reason to think that it would not help because it's been working for 9 years now since he has politically ascended in this country. Let's be very clear about something. To the extent that we still exist in a two-party system, Donald Trump is the undisputed leader of one of those two political parties. If you have any doubt about that, look at how he was virtually unopposed in taking over the financial and infrastructural mechanisms of his party, the Republican Party, by installing his daughter-in-law and saying that every penny will go to his reelection efforts. Well, Donald Trump is the titular and actual leader of 50% of the political participation in this country. And what we have now is no longer a tacit, no longer an explicit, but an explicit invocation of political violence. I have worked in politics for 25 years and studied it for the 10 years before that. The way I was raised, and I believe Susan and David, who's not here to raise, and I know you, Alex, was that what differentiates this country from the rest of the world, uncivilized or civilized, developed or undeveloped, is that we do not believe in political violence. We don't endorse it. We don't tolerate it. And what we have right now is 50% of the political participants, party-wise, in this country by their leader, not only encouraging, but exhorting violence. That is what that means, bloodbath. It's not saying that it's something that hasn't happened before, because it happened on January 6th. And I think it's very important, as I close, to point out that Donald Trump sowed doubt in the 2016 election, which he actually won. So, of course, his people don't believe that he actually lost in 2000. And he's saying that if I lose in 2024, which will very likely happen again because he's never won the popular vote, let's go ahead and initiate the political violence, which I am calling for as the leader of 50% of the electorate in this country. That's extraordinarily dangerous, and we are in unprecedented and dangerous and new territory in this country as a result.
So to that I say, preach, Don Calloway, but let's move to you, Susan. How dangerous is this rhetoric from the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party? How do you interpret the bloodbath comment?
It's a hard thing to struggle with, because as horrified as I am to hear that language coming from a nominee for president, it's Donald Trump, and it kind of just goes with who he is. We've heard this rhetoric from him before. Thankfully, in 2020, he lost a lot based on this type of rhetoric. And I want to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, Alex. This does not help him beyond his base. This is the behavior that made independents, suburban women, turn away from Donald Trump. So maybe they're seeing something in their polling that they need to really firm up more of who voted for him in 2020. But this, or he's just even more unhinged. I mean, there is a difference in who him campaigning in 2016, 2020, and now 2024. He's worse. So I just think it just emphasizes everything that he's about.
Yeah. All right. Both of you, please stay with me, because we're going to talk about what happened in Georgia on Friday in just a little bit. But first, the new worries about a potential TikTok ban. We're back in 60 seconds.
Here's to getting better with age.
Here's to beating these two every Thursday.
Help fuel today with Boost High Protein,